Coraline's But Night Nightmare. Written by Chapter 1. The story follows a young girl named Coraline, who lives in a small rural town with her parents. She has always had a love for dolls and often spends hours playing with them in her room. However, her peaceful life is turned upside down when she starts to notice strange occurrences happening around her. One night, as she is getting ready for bed, she glances out her bedroom window and notices a strange figure standing in the darkness. She rubs her eyes, thinking it's just her imagination, but when she looks again, she sees a pair of metallic hands with spindly fingers reaching out towards her window. Terrified, Coraline watches as the hands summon a doll from the dark abyss outside her window. The doll is wearing a pink dress and has curly brown hair, just like one of Coraline's own dolls. The hands then begin to dismantle the doll, piece by piece, until it is nothing but a pile of parts. Coraline can only watch in horror as the hands then reassemble the doll into a new creation with blue hair, a yellow raincoat, and galoshes.
Chapter 2. Coraline Jones is an adventurous 11-year-old girl who has just moved to a new home with her parents, Mel and Charlie. They have left their house in Michigan and are now living in the Pink Palace apartments in Oregon. The Pink Palace is a dilapidated pink Victorian house divided into 3 flats, surrounded by a dense forest and constantly shaded by an overcast sky. While her parents are busy assisting the movers with unpacking, Coraline decides to explore her new surroundings. She grabs a stick and uses it as a dowsing rod, hoping to discover something interesting along the way. As she follows the stick's guidance, she comes across a trail that leads her deep into the forest. Her curiosity gets the better of her, and she continues along the path until she reaches the top of a hill. It is there that she meets a black cat that emerges from the woods and studies her carefully from its perch. Coraline strikes up a conversation with the cat, asking if it knows where the old well is located. To her surprise, the cat responds by nodding its head. As she is about to follow the cat's lead, she is startled by an air horn that blows behind her. She turns around and sees a bicyclist wearing a skull-painted helmet, circling her. Feeling a sense of danger, Coraline prepares to defend herself. She uses her stick to defend herself and accidentally knocks the bicyclist off his bike. As he removes his helmet, he introduces himself as Wybie Lovett, the grandson of the owner of the Pink Palace. Wybie explains to Coraline that his grandmother would never allow a family with a child to move into the Pink Palace, and yet she has let Coraline's family in. Wybie shows Coraline the location of the old well, right under her feet, and admits that he is surprised that his grandmother allowed her family to move in. He explains that even he is not allowed near the Pink Palace, and he is not supposed to disclose why. Just then, they hear Wybie's grandmother calling him. He quickly pets the feral cat and rushes off on his bike, leaving Coraline alone.
Chapter 3. Coraline was used to spending rainy afternoons alone in her house. Her parents, both avid writers, were always preoccupied with their work for the gardening catalog, leaving Coraline to entertain herself. But on this particular afternoon, Coraline was determined to grab their attention. As the rain poured down outside, Coraline wandered through the house, scanning the shelves and cabinets for something to keep her occupied. But everything seemed either too boring or too fragile for her liking. Just when she was about to give up, a knock at the door caught her attention. She opened it to find her neighbor, Wybie, standing on the porch with a mysterious smile on his face. "I found something for you," he said, handing her a doll that looked just like Coraline. "It was in my grandmother's trunk and I thought you might like it." Coraline's eyes widened in surprise. She had never seen a doll that looked exactly like her before. She thanked Wybie and hurried back inside to show her parents. Her mother barely glanced up from her writing, but her father gave her a half-hearted smile and suggested she explore the house and write down what she saw. Coraline eagerly took the doll and began her mission. As she made her way through their flat, jotting down notes and drawing sketches, she couldn't help but notice a painting of a sullen-looking boy in blue clothes above the fireplace. She made a quick note of it and moved on. But as she was finishing up her notes, she noticed that her doll, which she had left on a nearby table in the drawing room, had mysteriously moved beneath a mattress leaning against the wall. Confused, Coraline walked over to investigate. She hesitantly moved the mattress and her eyes widened in surprise as she saw the outline of a small door behind the wallpaper. Without a moment's hesitation, She ran to her mother, begging for her help in opening the door. After searching through every kitchen drawer, they finally found a black skeleton key with a button end that seemed to fit the keyhole perfectly. With trembling hands, Coraline's mother turned the key and opened the door. But to their shock, they saw nothing but a solid brick wall. Disappointed and irritated, Coraline's mother told her to let her finish her work. Feeling frustrated and determined, Coraline refused to give up.
Chapter 4. Coraline was not pleased with the dinner her father had prepared. It was a gloomy dish of mashed potatoes and overcooked vegetables that looked as grimy as the weather outside. As she sat at the dinner table, pushing her food around on her plate, Coraline couldn't help but complain. "Dad, can't you cook something better than this?" she whined, wrinkling her nose at the unappetizing meal in front of her. Her father, who had been busy working at his computer all day, was taken aback by her words. "Coraline, I'm sorry, but this is all I had time to make tonight. Besides, it's not that bad," he replied with a hint of disappointment in his voice. Coraline huffed and crossed her arms, refusing to take another bite. Her mother scolded her for her rudeness and sent her to bed early as punishment. Defeated, Coraline trudged up to her room, feeling sorry for herself. As she lay in bed, unable to sleep, Coraline heard a faint squeaking sound coming from her room. She sat up and turned on her bedside lamp, only to find a small mouse scurrying across her floor. Furious, she followed it out of her room and down the hallway, until it disappeared behind the small door in the wall. The door had always been there, but Coraline had never given it much thought. However, something about the squeaking mouse drew her towards it. As she approached the door, she noticed that it was slightly cracked open. Without a second thought, Coraline pushed it open and peered inside. To her surprise, a wide and colorful passage had opened up before her. Without hesitation, Coraline crawled through it and emerged on the other side. She found herself in the drawing room again, but this one was much brighter and even the painting of the boy above the fireplace looked cheerful. Confused but intrigued, Coraline followed her nose to the kitchen where she found her mother cooking. However, when her mother turned to greet her, Coraline was startled to see that she had black buttons for eyes. "Coraline, my dear, it's so wonderful to see you," her mother said with a wide smile, revealing a mouthful of sharp teeth. Coraline's shock quickly subsided as her mother explained that she was her other mother, and that everyone has one. She told Coraline to collect her other father from his study before dinner. Eager to explore this strange new world, Coraline obliged. In her father's study, Coraline found her other father, looking lively and fun. He was playing the piano with a pair of puppet hands protruding from it, while singing a song just for Coraline. She couldn't help but smile, charmed by his playful demeanor.
Chapter 5. Coraline is delighted by her other parents and is thrilled to spend more time with them. Other mother, as she is called, invites Coraline to play a game with her. But when Coraline expresses concern about being late for bed, other mother takes her up to her other room, which is filled with colorful streamers and toys that can type. She even has a picture of her two best friends from Michigan on her nightstand, something that makes Coraline feel nostalgic and happy. Before Coraline goes to bed, other mother rubs some mud on her hands to help with the poison oak. The mud has a calming and soothing effect, and Coraline soon drifts off to sleep. However, the next morning, Coraline is back in her old room, and everything is just the way it was before she opened the small door. She is disappointed and misses the fun and excitement of the other world. As she tries to open the small door again, she finds that it's now bricked up, just like it was before. Coraline realizes that she has no way to return to the other world, and she starts to feel scared and worried. However, when she looks at her hands, she sees that the poison oak has completely disappeared, and she is relieved. She also realizes that as much as she enjoyed the other world, it wasn't the real world, and her real parents are the ones who truly love and care for her.
Chapter 6. The next morning, Coraline was bursting with excitement to tell her parents all about her amazing adventure. But to her disappointment, they dismissed it as a vivid dream and went about their daily routines. Coraline's mother, always one to explain away strong occurrences, suggested that she tell her dream to the actresses who lived downstairs. She even referred to them as dingbats, which only made Coraline feel more frustrated. Determined to prove that her adventure was real, Coraline went out onto the porch to get some fresh air. As she was walking, she tripped over a pile of mail that was addressed to M.R. Bobinsky, the man who lived upstairs. Curiosity piqued, Coraline decided to deliver the mail to him personally. When she reached his door, she was met with an eccentric and acrobatic Russian man with a blue complexion. His name was M.R. Bobinsky, and he seemed to be training circus mice. He accepted the packages Coraline brought, which contained foul-smelling cheese. He explained to Coraline that the cheese was meant to alleviate the mice's apparent musical difficulties. As Coraline was about to leave, Mr. Bobinsky suddenly became serious and warned her, "DC, do not go through little door," not understanding what he meant, but still feeling intrigued. Coraline asked what he was talking about. Mr. Bobinsky explained that his circus mice had warned him about a tiny door in his apartment that should never be opened. Before Coraline could ask any more questions, Mr. Bobinsky leaped down from his balcony and left her alone with her thoughts.
Chapter 7. One day, Coraline decides to visit Miss Spink and Miss Forcible, two retired burlesque actresses who live in the lower flat of her house. The two old ladies are still living in their past glory and are fixated on their Scotty dogs, some of which are dead and stuffed on shelves on the wall, dressed in angel outfits. Over tea, Miss Spink reads Coraline's tea leaves and predicts that she is in grave danger. She sees a gnarled hand in the leaves, which she interprets as a warning of danger. However, Miss Forcible sees a giraffe from her perspective and dismisses Miss Spink's prediction as nothing but nonsense. Chapter 8. Coraline had always been an adventurous and curious girl. She loved exploring and discovering new things, even if it meant getting in trouble sometimes. So when a thick fog descended upon her small town, she couldn't resist the temptation to venture outside. As she stepped into the fog, she felt a chill run down her spine. The air was thick and eerie, making it difficult to see more than a few feet in front of her. But Coraline wasn't afraid, she was excited. She had always been drawn to the unknown, and this foggy day was no exception. As she made her way through the fog, she suddenly heard a rustling sound behind her. She turned around to see Wybie, the boy from down the street, sneaking up on her with a strange contraption in his hand. Before she could say anything, Wybie proudly proclaimed that he was on the hunt for banana slugs. Coraline raised an eyebrow at him and couldn't help but laugh. She knew that Wybie wasn't known for his bravery, and hunting for slugs in the fog seemed like the last thing he would do. But as she looked closer, she noticed a small cat perched on Wybie's shoulders, his black fur blending in with the fog. "What's with the cat, Waspus?" Coraline teased, earning a disapproving look from the feline. Wybie just shrugged and explained that the cat didn't like to get its feet wet, hence the need for a carrier. Coraline couldn't help but laugh at the comical sight of Wybie and the cat sneaking around in the fog. As they continued their journey, Coraline noticed that Wybie kept glancing at her with a curious expression. She finally couldn't take it anymore and demanded to know what was on his mind. "Well, I've never been inside the Pink Palace," Wybie admitted sheepishly. Coraline was surprised to hear this. The Pink Palace was an abandoned mansion on the outskirts of town that everyone said was haunted. But Coraline had always been intrigued by it, and now she had a new mission, to get inside and explore. Wybie went on to explain that his grandmother, who he lived with, had a twin sister. They had lived in the Pink Palace as children, but one day, his great-aunt disappeared without a trace. His grandmother believed that she was stolen, but Coraline had a different theory. What if she just ran away? Coraline suggested. Wybie pondered her words for a moment before shrugging. He had never considered that possibility before. Coraline couldn't contain her excitement as she peppered Wybie with questions. But then she noticed something strange, a doll sitting in Wybie's backpack. It looked exactly like her. "Why do you have a doll that looks like me?" Coraline asked, her skepticism growing. Wybie explained that he had found the doll and that it must have been in the Pink Palace for as long as he could remember. But Coraline couldn't shake off the feeling that there was something off about the doll.
Chapter 9. As the sun began to set, Coraline could feel the familiar excitement rising in her chest. It was a new moon, which meant the mice would be visiting her bedroom that night. She quickly grabbed a few pieces of cheese from the kitchen and scattered them on her bedside table before climbing into bed, eagerly anticipating the adventures that awaited her. Sure enough, a few hours later, Coraline was woken by the sounds of squeaking and shuffling. She sat up in bed and saw the tiny mice hurrying around her room, their eyes glowing in the moonlight. Without hesitation, she followed them as they made their way through the open portal in her closet. Coraline found herself in the other world, where everything was a mirror image of her home. She blinked in amazement as she saw her other mother cooking in the kitchen, using the very cheese that she had left out for the mice. The other mother smiled warmly at her and told her to go fetch her other father, who was in the garden. Excited to explore the other world, Coraline made her way outside and found her other father tending to a garden filled with colorful, fluorescent flowers and snapdragons. But what caught her attention was the tractor he was using. It was shaped like a giant praying mantis. As Coraline approached, the tractor suddenly sprouted propellers and started to fly, with Coraline and her other father in tow. Together, they flew above the gardens and Coraline was amazed to see that the entire garden had been fashioned in her likeness. She couldn't help but smile at the thought that this world was made just for her. After the exhilarating ride, Coraline and her other father landed back in the garden, where her other mother was waiting with a bountiful dinner. They all sat down at the table and enjoyed the delicious food as they chatted and laughed. Just when Coraline thought the night couldn't get any better, the other mother suddenly stood up and opened the front door. To Coraline's surprise, she introduced her to other Ruby, a silent version of her eccentric neighbor who she had befriended in the real world. The other mother explained that she had made this version of Ruby for Coraline, thinking that she would prefer a friend who didn't type. Delighted with her new silent friend, Coraline and other Ruby went to visit Mr. Bobinski's flat, where they were in for a surprise. As they entered, they were greeted by the sight of pedal-controlled cannons shooting cotton candy and popcorn machines lining the walls. But the biggest surprise was the circus tent that had been erected in the center of the apartment. Coraline and other Ruby couldn't contain their excitement as they entered the tent and watched Mr. Bobinski's mice put on a spectacular musical show, bouncing on circus boards and performing acrobatic stunts. As the show came to an end, Mr. Bobinski himself appeared, looking dapper in a ringmaster's coat and hat, and thanked them for their applause. Feeling overwhelmed with joy, Coraline thanked her other mother and other father for the night's adventures before they led her to bed. As she settled under the covers, she couldn't help but feel grateful for her other family and companions and fell asleep with a smile on her face, with other mother, other father, and other Ruby sitting beside her.
Chapter 10. The next morning, Coraline woke up to the sound of her alarm clock. She groggily got out of bed and rubbed her eyes, trying to shake off the sleep. As she stretched her arms, she noticed something strange. She was back in her own bed, confused. She shook her head and got dressed. Her mother, Mel, told her that she would be taking her into town to buy some new school clothes. Coraline reluctantly agreed. As they made their way into town, Coraline spotted a beautiful pair of colorful gloves in a store window. She excitedly pulled her mother towards the store, but Mel huffed and insisted on buying drab and gray uniform pieces instead. Disappointed, Coraline followed her mother around the store, shunning her every chance she got. After finishing their shopping, Coraline's father, who worked for a catalog company, needed to go to the train station to deliver the latest edition to the editor. Mel dropped him off and then drove Coraline home. On the way back, Mel mentioned that she had found rat excrement near the small door in the drawing room and had locked it. This only made Coraline more upset with her mother. When they reached home, Coraline noticed that the fridge was almost empty. Mel offered to go and buy some groceries and asked Coraline to come with her, but Coraline refused. She preferred to be alone and explore the house. Mel left with a slightly saddened expression on her face, leaving Coraline alone in the house. Coraline saw this as an opportunity to investigate the small door. She took the skeleton key from its perch and opened the door. To her surprise, the passage was open. Ignoring the disapproving look from the feral cat outside, Coraline eagerly crawled through the dark tunnel. On the other side, Coraline found herself in a different world, the other world. The house was similar to hers, but everything was brighter and more colorful. The kitchen table was laden with treats and different foods, and there was even a gift box containing a new outfit for Coraline to wear. A note from Other Mother explained that Other Spink and Other Forcible had something to show her after lunch.
Chapter 11. Coraline was exploring the garden outside of her new apartment, taking in the colorful flowers and lush trees. She had always loved nature and was excited to explore her new surroundings. As she walked, she spotted a black cat sitting on a tree branch. She couldn't help but notice that the cat was missing the trademark button eyes that most cats in this world had. Curiosity getting the best of her, Coraline walked closer to the cat. She was startled when the cat spoke to her in a deep, raspy voice. "Hello Coraline," the cat spoke. "I am the real world cat. The one with the button eyes is just a copy created by the other mother." Coraline couldn't believe what she was hearing. The cat went on to explain that he had the ability to traverse the barriers between worlds, despite other mothers' attempts to keep him out. He also warned Coraline of other mothers' true intentions and that she was not to be trusted. Coraline was skeptical and didn't believe the cat's words. But the cat told her that cats have superior senses and can detect things that humans cannot. He then sensed something in the distance and ran off, leaving Coraline to ponder over everything he had said. Shaken by the encounter, Coraline continued on her exploration. She came across Spink and Forcible's apartment, which had been turned into a large auditorium. To her surprise, it was filled with hundreds of Scotty dogs, all barking and wagging their tails. Coraline made her way to the front row and saw other Wybie sitting there. She sat next to him as the show started. The Spink and Forcible that she knew, albeit with painted button eyes, came out to perform individual skits in rather unflattering outfits. But their competition for the spotlight soon became dangerous as the stage props crashed down around them. The curtain closed and the second act started. Spink and Forcible appeared on either end of the stage, standing on diving boards while a bucket of water was pushed to the center. Then, to Coraline's surprise, their older facades unzipped to reveal their youthful, skinny selves. They effortlessly swung on trapeze wires, including Coraline in their act. They swung her around the auditorium, to the delight of the barking dogs, and caught her as they landed on the bucket.
Chapter 12. Coraline had returned to the other mother's apartment after spending a day at the circus with her parents. As soon as she stepped inside, she couldn't stop raving about the amazing show she had just witnessed. The colorful tents, the acts of magic, and the delicious cotton candy, it was all so wonderful. But as she excitedly shared her stories with the other mother, she couldn't help but notice that other Wybie, her button-eyed double, was looking sullen and distant. Sensing Coraline's curious gaze, other mother quickly motioned for other Wybie to smile. But Coraline knew something was off. Other Wybie had never been a fan of the circus, yet he had insisted on coming today, and now, he seemed completely uninterested in listening to Coraline's tales. Coraline decided to brush off her suspicions and trust the other mother as she led her into the dining room for dinner. As they sat down at the table, other mother's cheerful demeanor suddenly changed. She leaned in close to Coraline and with a menacing smile, she whispered, "You know, if you want, you can stay here forever." Coraline's heart skipped a beat. She had always dreamed of having an adventure in the other world, but living there forever? That was a whole different story. She was about to object when other mother placed a small box in front of her. "In order to stay here forever, you just have to perform one little thing," other mother said, her voice dripping with sweetness. Coraline opened the box and gasped at what she saw inside, 2 black buttons with sewing thread and a needle. She looked up at the other mother in horror. Buttons were a symbol of the other world and its power over its inhabitants. Coraline knew that if she sewed those buttons into her eyes, she would be trapped here forever, just like the other children other mother had taken. Coraline vehemently refused and pushed the box away. She asked to go to bed early to think things over. As she walked to her room, she couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. What if the other mother couldn't be trusted? What if this was all a trap? Once inside her room, Coraline immediately went to her toy chest and stuffed her talking toys inside. She didn't want them to be taken away from her. Then she took out a picture she had drawn of her button-eyed friends and hid it under her pillow. She didn't want the other mother to know how much she missed them. Coraline lay in bed and prayed to fall asleep quickly. She needed time to come up with a plan to escape. But as she closed her eyes, she couldn't help but hear the whispers of her button-eyed friends calling out to her. She covered her ears and begged for sleep to take her away.
Chapter 13. Coraline wakes up to find herself still in the other world, a twisted and sinister version of her own home. She is confused and frustrated, as she thought she had escaped from this place and returned to her real family. But as she jumps out of bed and takes a look around, she realizes that she is still trapped. She quickly gets dressed and rushes downstairs, hoping to find other mother and demand to go home. However, she finds other father sitting at the piano with his puppet-like hands, playing a somber tune.
Coraline demands to see other mother, but other father tells her that they mustn't talk when she is not around. Frustrated and determined to find a way out, Coraline decides to go find other Wybie, the boy who had helped her escape the clutches of other mother before. But when she mentions him to other father, he tells her that there is no point in looking for him. Wybie pulled a lone face and mother didn't like it. Other father's face distorts into a horrifyingly long shape as he speaks, before his puppet hands clamp over his mouth, silencing him. Coraline shudders and runs outside, determined to find Wybie and figure out a way to escape this nightmare. As she walks away from the house, she notices that the other world is starting to deteriorate. The bright and colorful surroundings are fading away, leaving behind a dark and desolate landscape. Coraline is both relieved and worried at the same time. She knows that the end of this world may mean a way out for her, but she also worries about the fate of the other trapped souls that exist within it. Just then, the cat appears beside her. It tells Coraline that the other mother only created what it thought she would like. The cat also reveals that it can see through the illusions of the other world and that there is no way out except through the house. Coraline realizes that the cat had been trying to warn her all along. Together, they walk towards the house as the other world crumbles around them. Small world, Coraline comments, in a mix of fear and awe. As they enter the house, they find themselves back in the other mother's lair. But this time, Coraline has a plan. She uses her wit and courage to defeat other mother and free all the trapped souls, including herself.
Chapter 14. The cat revealed that the other mother had been watching Coraline for some time, and that she wanted her for something, possibly for something to love, or even to eat. Coraline was understandably scared and the cat assured her that he would keep her safe. As they continued to explore the house, they came upon a bush where the cat suddenly lunged and caught a small circus mouse in its mouth. But as the cat's jaws clamped down, the mouse transformed into an ugly, sandbag rat. The cat explained that he didn't like rats at the best of times, but this one was sounding an alarm. Ignoring the rat, the cat led Coraline back to the house, where they discovered that the small door had been blocked by a large beetle-shaped bureau. As they tried to figure out how to get past it, the other furniture in the room suddenly came to life, appearing as grotesque, insect-like creatures. They swiftly seated Coraline in front of the other mother, who was eating strange cocoa beetles. Coraline demanded to be allowed to go home, but the other mother grew angry and told Coraline to apologize as she counted to 3. As she counted, the other mother's body began to transform, growing grotesquely tall and elongated. Coraline realized with horror that she had been talking to a spider all along. At the count of 3, the disfigured other mother grabbed Coraline and threw her through a mirror into a dank room with a single bed. She told Coraline that she could come out when she learns to be a loving daughter.
Chapter 15. On her first night in the new home, Coraline couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She shrugged it off as her imagination running wild and went to bed. But as she lay in her bed, she couldn't shake the eerie feeling that someone, or something, was in the room with her. And then she heard it, a small rustle and the faint sound of whispering. Terrified, she slowly turned to see 3 ghostly children standing at the foot of her bed. 2 girls and a boy, all dressed in old-fashioned clothes and with a haunting look in their empty eyes. Coraline was frozen in fear, but the children's ghostly voices told her to be quiet, for the Belden might be listening. They explained that the Belden was an ancient witch who had lived in the house years ago. She had been known for her beauty, but as she grew older and uglier, she turned to witchcraft to regain her youth. The children revealed that they didn't remember their own names, but they remembered how the Belden used dolls in their image to spy on them. She would see what made them unhappy and then lure them into the other world, a parallel dimension where the Belden ruled. There, she would give them games and treats, telling them that she loved them. But as the children grew more and more enchanted by the wonders of the other world, they started to want more. And that's when the Belden would sew buttons into their eyes, trapping them in her grasp. She would then devour their lives and throw their souls into a mirror, where they were doomed to stay for eternity. The children begged Coraline to escape before it's too late and to help set their souls free by finding their missing eyes. Coraline promised to try, but before she could come up with a plan, she was suddenly pulled through the mirror by someone or something that looked like her friend, Wybie. But this was no ordinary Wybie. His eyes were sewn shut and his mouth was twisted into a cruel grin. As Coraline struggled to break free, She realized that she had to find a way to remove the threads from Wybie's mouth. With all her strength she pulled and tugged until the threads came undone, and other Wybie let out a horrifying screech before disappearing into thin air.
Chapter 16. As she entered the kitchen, her heart sank at the sight that greeted her. The groceries her mother had gone out to get were sitting on the kitchen table, now completely covered in mold and swarming with flies. It was as if time had stood still and her mother had never returned. Coraline searched the house, calling out for her parents, but no one answered. It was almost as if she was alone in the world. Just as she was about to give up hope, a knock sounded at the door. With a rush of excitement, Coraline ran to the door and flung it open, expecting to see her mother or father. To her surprise, it was not her parents standing on the other side. Instead, it was Wybie, the strange boy who lived next door and had always been a bit of a loner. He seemed frantic as he asked Coraline for the doll that she had taken from his grandmother's house. He explained that his grandmother was enraged because the doll once belonged to her missing sister. Coraline felt a pang of guilt, realizing that the doll she had taken from Wybie's house was not just any ordinary toy. She remembered how the doll had once looked like the 3 ghost children she had met in the other world, but she didn't think much of it at the time. Now, as Wybie stood before her, pleading for the return of the doll, Coraline's mind raced with thoughts. She suddenly had a realization. The 3rd ghost child, the girl with the braids and ribbons, must have been Grandma Lovett's missing sister. She knew she had to tell Wybie the truth. Together, they made their way upstairs to Coraline's room where the doll was kept. As she handed over the doll to Wybie, she explained everything she had discovered about the doll and the other world. Wybie listened in disbelief as Coraline described how the doll was meant to spy on children and lure them into the other world with false promises. However, as Wybie searched the doll for any hidden secrets, they both realized that it was missing. In a moment of panic, Wybie accused Coraline of playing a prank on him and ran out of the house screaming that she was crazy. Feeling defeated, Coraline threw her shoes at Wybie in frustration before rushing outside to see if her parents had returned. To her horror, she found no sign of them or their car. In a desperate attempt to reach her parents, Coraline called her father's phone, but it only rang and rang with no answer.
Chapter 17. Coraline had been staying with her eccentric neighbors, the retired burlesque performers Spink and Forcible, while her parents were away on business. She enjoyed their whimsical company and their eccentric home, which was filled with strange trinkets and oddities. But one day, as she was exploring their house, she noticed something different about her neighbor's beloved dog, Angus. He seemed to be wearing a peculiar outfit, an angel costume with tiny little wings on his back. Spink was feverishly sewing away at it, muttering under her breath about how Angus hadn't been feeling well lately. Coraline couldn't help but worry about her missing parents, who hadn't contacted her in days. She timidly asked Spink and Forcible if they had heard from them, but they seemed distracted and brushed off her concerns. As Coraline sat pouting on the couch, Spink suddenly exclaimed, "Oh, I almost forgot." She rushed to a nearby cabinet and pulled out a small, glittering ball of taffy candy. Forcible joined her and together they broke it open to reveal a small triangular stone with a hole in it. They handed it to Coraline, saying that it was a special seeing stone that was useful for finding bad or lost things. However, they couldn't agree on exactly what it was best at finding. Feeling a bit skeptical but grateful, Coraline thanked the 2 old ladies and returned to her room. As she lay in bed, she couldn't shake off the feeling of dread in her stomach. She missed her parents terribly and was worried sick about them. So, she did what she always did when she was feeling anxious. She created likenesses of her parents out of pillows and laid them in their empty bed. Tears streamed down her face as she cried herself to sleep. In the middle of the night, Coraline was awakened by a weight on her chest. She slowly opened her eyes to see the neighborhood cat, who had also been staying with Spink and Forcible. It was staring intently at her with its glowing yellow eyes. Coraline asked the cat if it knew where her parents were. To her surprise, the cat pulled out her favorite doll from under the bed. But this was no ordinary doll. It had 2 faces, each one resembling one of her parents. Coraline was both frightened and fascinated by it. She followed the cat downstairs and into the hallway, where she noticed something strange in the mirror. Instead of her own reflection, she saw an image of her parents shivering in the cold and writing "Help us" on the frosted glass. Coraline's heart raced as she realized that her parents were trapped somewhere and needed her help. She quickly ran back to her room and grabbed her favorite army hat, a vest, and the triangular stone. She also took a few tools and the skeleton key from her father's study and stuffed them into her pockets.
Chapter 18. As Coraline and the other mother go through the small door, her cat, who can talk in this world, urges her to challenge the other mother to a game. The cat reveals that the other mother never refuses games, giving Coraline the best chance to escape. Determined to find a way back to her real parents, Coraline accepts the challenge.
Chapter 19. One day, as she was wandering through the garden, she stumbled upon a peculiar sight. Some of the hummingbird plants were trying to steal a small, triangular stone from each other. It was a strange and unusual occurrence, and Coraline couldn't help but be intrigued. She cautiously approached the plants and reached out to touch the stone when suddenly, she noticed something odd. Through the hole in the stone, she could see that the world appeared to be gray and lifeless, except for one small ball of light in the shape of an eye. It was unlike anything she had ever seen before, and she couldn't tear her eyes away from it. Just then, she heard a loud noise and turned to see a praying mantis-shaped tractor coming towards her. The tractor was being driven by her other father, a twisted and sinister version of her real father. He yelled out to her, demanding that she hand over the stone. Confused and scared, Coraline ran away from the tractor, with her other father hot on her heels. As she weaved through the garden, trying to escape the tractor, Coraline stumbled upon a bridge that crossed over a small pond. Without thinking, she ran across the bridge, but it couldn't hold the weight of the tractor and collapsed, sending both Coraline and the tractor into the water. Panicked and gasping for air, Coraline saw her other father struggling in the water. He managed to grab onto something and pulled himself up. It was the eye, glowing and pulsating in his hand. He handed it over to Coraline and apologized, claiming that the other mother was forcing him to chase her. With the eye in hand, Coraline could feel its power coursing through her body. Suddenly, the entire garden began to wither and turn to stone. The plants wilted, the flowers crumbled, and the buzzing bees fell silent. The only thing left was the colorful ball of light, the first eye, that glowed brighter than ever before.
Chapter 20. Meanwhile, the moon overhead was beginning to eclipse, casting an eerie darkness over the already strange world. Coraline knew that she had limited time to find what she was looking for. For deep down, she knew that this alternate reality was not just a fun fantasy, but a dangerous trap. With determination, Coraline made her way to Spink and Forcible's dilapidated home, which had deteriorated even further since her last visit. The once vibrant and colorful house now looked like a scene from a horror movie. The Scotty dogs, who were once her loyal companions, now resided on the ceiling, looking more like bats with their button eyes and eerie howls. But Coraline couldn't afford to be distracted. She had to find the second eye, a precious pearl ring, which was the key to unlocking the truth about this strange world. And she knew that Spink and Forcible held the answers she was seeking. As she made her way through the dark and eerie house, Coraline finally found Spink and Forcible on the stage, cocooned in a taffy-like wrapper. She could see the pearl ring glimmering in one of their hands. Without hesitation, she plunged her hand into the sticky wrapper to retrieve it. But her actions had woken the actresses, their tangled and twisted bodies resembling taffy as they shrieked and grasped at her. Coraline's heart raced as she fought to extract the precious ring from their grasp. And just when she thought things couldn't get any worse, the dogbats swooped down from the ceiling, agitated by the light from Coraline's flashlight. In a split second, Coraline ducked for cover, narrowly escaping the dogbats' sharp claws and beady button eyes. But their attack caused chaos in the theater, and Coraline saw her chance to grab the pearl ring. With a swift movement, she snatched it from the actress's hands. And as the auditorium turned to grey stone, Spink and Forcible disintegrated into dust, along with the dogbats. Coraline was left standing alone in the decaying theater, clutching the second eye tightly in her hand. With a newfound determination, Coraline knew she had to find her way back to her own world before it was too late.
Chapter 21. Next, Coraline went to Other Babinska's apartment where she saw a disturbing sight. Dangling from a pole on the balcony were the empty clothes of Mother Wybie, her friend who was now a puppet controlled by the beldam. However, Coraline didn't let her fear get the best of her as she shouted to the beldam that she wasn't scared. With determination, Coraline entered the apartment and found Other Babinski, reduced to only his ringmaster coat and hat. He asked why she would want to leave this perfect world, but Coraline knew he was just a copy and couldn't understand her. She used the stone she had obtained from the other Miss Pink and Miss Forcible to find the third eye inside Other Babinski's hat. As she reached for the eye, Other Babinski's clothes fell away to reveal a group of circus rats inside. The head rat shrieked at her and tried to escape with the eye in its mouth. The other rats joined in to sabotage Coraline's pursuit, but she remained focused. As a last resort, Coraline threw the triangular seeing stone at the head rat as it fled through the doggy door, but to her dismay, she missed. In a moment of panic, Coraline chased the rat onto the balcony, which started to fall apart and collapse. Coraline fell to the ground below and began to cry, realizing that she had lost the rat and the game. As she looked up at the sky, Coraline noticed that the eclipse of the moon was almost complete. And in that moment, she saw a glimmer of hope. The shadow that had been following her all this time was actually a button, the one that the beldam used to control her victim.
Chapter 22. Finally, after parting numerous challenges and overcoming AUDIOBOOK traps, Coraline and T-Cat were able to retrieve all 3 eyes. T-Cat team appears with T-Rat in its smooth and relinquishes Taylor style. Coraline thanks him and Tim. Together, they go back in the top imperial parents. T-Pin boom T-Walls tinning and peeling up. Who to come entering T-Cabin room. Coraline and T-Cat were made with a shocking leap. T-Beldam herself, T-AUDIOBOOK to a bomb, had been reduced to a louder, speedily removed which simply brings and package, with a spin. T-Nivita T-Cat and T-Group T-Triangular stone before throwing it into T-Fever. The two tell told, Coraline was what they to use her with to West T-Location of her parents. In a moment of desperation, Coraline announced that her parents were behind T-Small door in T-Wall. T-Beldam took T-Group T-Kai and as he went to open T-Door, Coraline zapped her parents' miniaturized and taped written as not globe on T-Mantle. The T-Door opened, T-Beldam turned to Coraline, cuddling and saying that she's not taking T-AUDIOBOOK forever. But Coraline refused to give up. No, in what she should hate, throwing T-Cat at T-Beldam and clapping T-Not globe. She stuffed it in her pocket as T-Cat scratched to T-Beldam's bottom eyes, causing T-Room to fall apart, leaving nothing but a lonely of weeping. T-Cat hopped and ran through T-Small door as Coraline struggled to avoid falling into T-Center of T-Meat. As he climbed it, T-Refractions were well beat his Beldam, holding weight after her. But Coraline was determined to escape and just continue. She managed to get through T-Small door, with T-Beldam's painful shrieks and wails echoing behind her. On the interior vault, Coraline slammed T-Small door shut and locked it, trapping T-Beldam in T-AUDIOBOOK forever.
Chapter 23. So when she heard the front door open and the familiar sound of her parents' voices, she couldn't contain her excitement. She ran down the stairs and into the living room, ready to embrace them with all her might. But as soon as she saw them, she froze in confusion. Her parents were standing in the middle of the room, covered in melted snow. They looked exactly like they did in her memories, but something was differently. Their expressions were stern and they didn't seem all that happy to see her. Before Coraline could say anything, her parents scolded her for breaking the snow globe and cutting her knee. She looked down and saw the band on her knee, but she couldn't remember how she got it. She tried to explain that she didn't remember breaking the snow globe, but her parents didn't believe her. Instead, they announced that they were going out to eat that night to celebrate the publication of their new catalog. Coraline was confused. She had never heard about any catalog and she couldn't understand why her parents were behaving so strongly. As her parents continued discussing the details of the garden party they were planning, Coraline couldn't shake off the feeling that something was not right. She decided to let it go and just be happy that her parents were finally back. After dinner, her mother put her to bed and told her to get some rest. As she was leaving the room, her mother placed a small box on her bed. Coraline opened it and found a beautiful pair of gloves inside. She remembered mentioning that she wanted them before her parents left, and she was surprised and happy that they remembered.
Chapter 24. She wagt es nur ohne nicht hoch in TK, wo sie hat Covenant T-Beldam in der Eskape und siehe der Window. TK sie sieht wie Obsit mit her, gut Coraline Apologies Hand in Liebes ihm Todmügre mit her in den. Als sie Praxis T-Trägers Kilpens Eis und der Herr Pero, sie Priamshof T-Wein Finale Fleisch bewies, tanken her vor Herr Paveli. Gut T-Hilfen also wann er Tag T-Beldam ist stiller Liebe an den Neverstockloking vorher. Wen Coraline wagt es gut, sie finst Tag T-Eis habe dem Poken benährt Herr Pero. Che realizes tal te beldamis after te skeleton kai tal che hat uset o escape from te alternate volt. Che muss kide te kai anticides to id in side te vel alt te top of te hill. However, as che is apud tot so, te beldams spindli ant escapes trug te door anstalts following her. Te ant discovers her intent and attacks her, bring to take te kai back. Coraline struggles with it until with me, her night war unfriend, appears to help. Reading his speaker and loving his eye on, he trist to cap te kai, but he hand trips him and he falls into te well. He holds on to some roads to keep from falling, as te hand trist to stop him. Coraline quickly wraps te hand in her shovel, but it quickly reaps to it. Before it can attack again, the bee manages to pull himself out of te well and pokes a large rock on te hand, cracking it. Coraline and the bee wrap te hand and hold together in te shovel and te eat the te string from te skeleton kai. Tai pop it into te well, hoping to the all te beldams poor forever. As Tai boat create a seek of relief, Tai realizes that Tai make a create team and that Tai can always come on air order.
Chapter 25. Feeling a mix of confusion and curiosity, Bibi decided to confront Coraline about it. He found her by the tiny door in her house, trying to open it again with her trusty cat by her side. Without hesitation, he showed her the picture and expressed his belief. Coraline's face lit up with excitement and she explained that the doll in the picture was the same one she had found in the secret world. She then told Bibi that she had met his grandmother's twin sister when she was in the other world, and that she was still there. Suddenly, they heard a voice calling out for Bibi. It was his grandmother's voice. She had always been full of life and energy, and her sudden passing had left a void in Bibi's heart. But now, he could hear her calling out to him once again. He couldn't believe his ears. Excited and anxious, he turned to Coraline for help. Coraline knew exactly what to do. She told Bibi to bring his grandmother to the garden party she was having the next day, where she promised to tell her everything later. The garden party was an event that Coraline had organized to celebrate her new house and the long-awaited spring season. She had invited all her neighbors, including Bibi, and promised them a fun day of planting flowers and enjoying ice-cold drinks. As promised, Bibi brought his grandmother to the garden party the next day. The atmosphere was buzzing with laughter and happiness as everyone gathered to help plant flowers in Coraline's garden. Coraline welcomed them warmly, offering them drinks and snacks. She even gave Bibi's grandmother a special seat and a cold drink, making her feel like a guest of honor. Once everyone was settled, Coraline stood up and addressed the crowd. She then turned to Bibi's grandmother and began to tell her about her adventures in the secret world and how she had met her twin sister there. As she spoke, Bibi's grandmother's eyes lit up with recognition and tears filled her eyes. She couldn't believe what she was hearing.
Chapter 26. Meanwhile, just beyond the house, a small cat named sat on top of the signpost. He had become his favorite spot in the town. He loved to watch the world go by from such a high perch. He was a curious cat, and on a day he noticed something strange about the pink palace. He could see a small beam sticking out from the top of the signpost, and it looked like it was leading to a secret passage behind the pink palace. His curiosity got the best of him, and he decided to investigate. He stretched and walked along the beam, passing the tip of the post and vanishing from sight. As he stealthily made his way towards the pink palace, he could hear the sound of laughter and music coming from the garden. He carefully peeked through the bushes and saw the extravagant garden party taking place. The end.